think this is a huge part of From Here Forward, and my experience in changing people's minds and having any impact on anyone, is that it's a lot harder to argue with I saw than I think, right? You have thoughts, I have thoughts, everybody's got thoughts, and that's wonderful. But I've seen people get killed, right? I've seen one of my best friends bleed out on the floor and then go up to a settler, and I go up to a settler as this is happening, and I tell him, you know, you just killed someone, and he tells me, and I'm glad I did it. And then I watch that same settler point out the Palestinians he wants arrested, while literally 20 minutes before he had murdered someone.
But you fucking Klay Thompson, it's evil.
Topic of discussion for sure.
Oh, how dare he? But all right, we're recording. We'll get to Klay Thompson later once we get to the spicy stuff. But here we go. Welcome back to War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. My guest today has been involved in human rights in Israel-Palestine since he was 4 years old, and today is the founder of the nonprofit From Here Forward. Welcome, Mattan Berner-Kadish.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you have, without a doubt, my favorite origin story and just incredible lore. So tell me, how did you get involved in this work, or how does this work involve you?
Yeah, sometimes it feels more the second than the first. My parents sued the state of Israel when I was very young so that my non-birth mother could be legally recognized as my parent. They won. It went to the Supreme Court. I was very little. But before I had any choice as to being involved with this place and with this conflict, it was kind of thrust upon me. My parents were longtime activists in this space. My mother at one point worked for the New Israel Fund. She worked for J Street. We grew up going to rallies. I was at anti-Iraq war rallies when I was very young. We were living in Israel at different points. And, you know, I would always go back and forth. I lived there in 8th grade for a year. I went to Israeli public school. I did a pre-army program there. I led trips there while I was in college for my summer camp. And I started spending time really in the West Bank in 2021. I was living in Basel Ador's basement with a group of Israelis who were learning Arabic and doing what at the time could still technically be referred to as protective presence. Really have been going back since. Every time I would visit, I would go spend time in the West Bank. And then this summer, I spent almost 3 months pretty much entirely in El-Khair, in a village in Masafer Yatta, and came back and have been in the process of forming From Here Forward since. And I'm launching that in August.
Yes. Something that struck me in the article. So I read the 2000 article about the court case, and I don't know if you've read it in a while, but the second to last paragraph, it says, with the speed of the Israeli news cycle, Mattan became part of popular culture in a day. This happened even at a time when Israel was still reeling from the quick withdrawal from Lebanon, which had been fought for by a grassroots group called the Four Mothers Movement, started by soldiers' mothers. Oh my gosh, it's wild to read as Israel is occupying Lebanon again. And was there in 2006. Like since the 2000 article, what has changed in Israel in the past 26 years?
Man, well, you know, I think you can go back a little further. I was born just a few months after Yitzhak Rabin was murdered. And, you know, I think a lot of what has changed about Israel is kind of what led me to form From Here Forward and think about what that actually meant, right? I think that when I was born, there was a peace movement. There was if not a majority, a plurality of Israeli society that genuinely believed that peace was feasible and we were on the way there and there was something to be done. And I think when you look at Israeli society today, it's pretty hard to convince yourself, unless you are really trying to. If you take an objective look at polling, if you take an objective look at the way that people speak, the way that the government is acting, the narrative that they are depicting, that there is any sort of real appetite or population within Israel that really wants to end the occupation, end apartheid, stop ethnically cleansing Palestinians, and at this point, bombing Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and just generally causing havoc across the Middle East. So I think in many ways, certainly since I've been a conscious adult, which I would kind of place around 2010, 11, in the preamble to the Iran deal, I think that there has been a consistent growth within Israeli society to a now very strong majority of, and this is reflected in the repeated reelection of Bibi Netanyahu, who has been prime minister largely my whole adult life, in maintaining the status quo, which when you spend time on the ground, you pretty quickly recognize is allowing for things to get worse and worse, for more and more settlements to be built, for more and more Palestinian land to be taken, and for a continuation of policies that have existed long before Netanyahu, but certainly in the past few years have gotten more and more intense in their proactivity in pushing a lot of these policies.
Yeah, what are such policies, and are they reflected in what our mainstream Jewish institutions tell us is a falafel and orange juice paradise full of beach parties and hot soldiers who only exist to be hot and don't do anything else?
Right. They're eye candy.
Exactly.
And I think what immediately comes to my mind is when I first started spending time in the West Bank, I would start the day feasibly walking children, picking them up from school where they had gotten an army escort between a settlement and an outpost because there had been repeated violence against them as they walked to school in the past.
Violence against children.
Violence against Palestinian children by Israeli settlers. Again, very little has changed. It's only gotten worse. Now they're just prevented from going to school entirely. So we would go do that. That would be very early in the morning. Then maybe there would be a house demolition, or there would be some sort of incident where settlers were grazing on Palestinian land. And this would all happen maybe before 2:00 in the afternoon. And then I would get in a car with a few other Israelis to go back for the weekend. And an hour and a half later, I would be on the beach, right, in Tel Aviv, with many of my friends, Israeli friends, who, even if they weren't necessarily supportive of what was happening, if they didn't believe that the ethnic cleansing was good, that Palestinians should live under occupation and apartheid, their attitude was generally apathetic towards all of it, right? It wasn't something that really bothered them. They certainly weren't doing anything about it. And this has only gotten more and more intense, right? I've spent a lot of time, particularly in Area C. I've spent some time in Area A. You can go, even with Israeli citizenship. Don't let them lie to you, as Sam Stein loves to say. You can go to these places and you can see every time you return more and more land that used to be in Palestinian control, or at least open to Palestinian use for herding or farming, is just no longer in the control. It's fenced off, controlled by settlements. So what you're watching happen, the policies that are actively playing out on the ground while our Jewish institutions are talking about the two-state solution, and so many other things, the right for Israel to exist and the right for it to defend itself. What is actively occurring is that the government is supporting settlers and working with them actively daily to remove Palestinians from their land and to push Palestinians more and more, both into Area A particularly, and ideally outside of the West Bank entirely. And this happens so many different ways, in so many different places. I think one of Israel's great successes is that it has And this is obviously horrible. I'm not saying a success in terms of it being a good thing, but they have done a tremendous job in terms of stratifying Palestinians and creating so many different Palestinian experiences depending on where people are, that people are dealing with entirely different things, all with the same goal. But the experience of someone in Jenin or the experience of someone in Tulkarem has very little to do on a day-to-day basis with the Palestinian experience in Masaf al-Yatta, because they're experiencing completely different things. The thing that remains the same is that Israel is in charge, right? I recently made a video talking about how in the village of al-Khair, what apartheid looks like on a daily basis right now is that children are being prevented from going to school, and there are demolition orders, and the Palestinians of al-Khair are actually were not allowed to go attend the hearing in front of the civil administration to fight for their right to have their homes not demolished by the Israeli civil administration, right? They were told only your lawyers can go because it's in a settlement. And a lot of comments were, these people live in Area C, or these people aren't technically, they're controlled by the Israeli government. And then even Palestinians in the West Bank at large are not controlled by the Israeli government. And I think when you spend time on the ground, when you engage with it really, the thing that I like to talk about is if you have two different governments, right? And one government is in charge of building your roads and maintaining your schools and paying, the teachers and the people doing the roads and paying for the hospitals and all those things. And then the second government can come, blow these places up, destroy them, kill people there, and they get away with it and there's no consequences. Who's in charge of your life, right? I would argue government number two every day, all day, right? It's great that Palestinians can technically build some of their, homes in Area A and have, can have their own institutions, but they are at risk any given day of being entered by Israeli soldiers who, if they kill or hurt or torture anyone, there will be no consequences. And they will not be reprimanded by the Palestinian government in a way that impacts their decisions or impacts their ability to do it in the future. So what you witness is this massive disconnect between what is daily occurring and has been for years. The first time I went to the West Bank, it was during the changed government, right? This is, Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, who now we have, so many American Jewish liberals or even just moderates saying, we just need to get Netanyahu out and then Bennett will come in and things will be different. I was there. A lot of the same stuff was happening. This is pre-October 7th. I was in al-Khair when an old man was run over by a truck who was confiscating Palestinian cars. This man was killed. Everyone knows the settler who did it. He lives in Kiryat Arba in Hebron. There were no consequences, right? Like this has been happening. This is not new. And the main thing that has also not, or another thing that has also not changed, is that our Jewish institutions in the United States largely don't want to engage with this reality, right? I think we've seen in the last few weeks, and maybe a month or two, we've seen them kind of start talking more and more about settler violence and how bad it is and that it should stop. And what they refuse to engage with is that, yeah, the violence is, much of it is done by settlers, but it is coordinated with the army and it is being planned at the highest levels of the government. People think that this is just willy-nilly ragtag. This is planned out. These are people in settlements, adults with power, with connections to the government, who are making these decisions, who are saying, we need to get this village out of here to remove them so we have more territorial continuity, so we can make it harder for these Palestinians to get to Area A, to get groceries or get to anywhere they need to go, get to work. And this is a long-term, thought-out process that is happening with support from the highest levels of government. There are settler terrorists, absolutely, and there are army terrorists, and they're working together every single day.
And so Naftali Bennett is not the breath of
The great
fresh air, right?
No, Naftali Bennett's a settler. I think if you go back, when I really started, I've always engaged with Israeli politics, but when I started to do so, when I took my gap year in Israel, I was part of a gap year program that was known as one of the most left-wing pre-army gap year programs, if you believe in the concept, right?
Right, an incredible, jumbo shrimp, left-wing army.
There you go, perfect. To be fair, the head of our program voted for the United Arab List. He was a guy who talked about the rise of fascism in the country. I really respect him, and I think a lot of him, and he taught me a lot of things. And our and our counselors were really, really thoughtful and smart, but we were preparing to go to the army. You know, I was one of 2 people who then didn't go at all. Some people went and did national service, but a lot of my friends went and served, many in, combat units, even elite combat units. One of my good friends at the time, we are largely no longer speaking, he went and served in Duvdevan, which is the unit that is kind of the Awdah is based off of, that goes into Area A in the West Bank and kidnaps and or kills people. Now, some of these people could be defined as terrorists, but I think we have all seen that when there are casualties, that does not stop people from going in and doing it again. When there are innocent casualties, that does not prevent the Israeli army from then going and making the exact same decisions and returning to these places, nor are there real consequences for them. But so when I was in this program, it was this very it was a time where the election was, the hope at the time was Isaac Herzog. He was going to be the guy who was going to take Bibi out finally, and he was talking about making changes and doing different things. And I think this is what is so important about this one particular election is the day of the election, right, is the famous Bibi quote of, the Arabs are going to the polls in droves, right? Which was kind of a harbinger for what, the next many years, the last 10 years of Israeli politics have been, certainly the last 5, where, the Arab parties, the 48 Palestinian parties, are often the difference between the left, the center left, and just the center being able to actually have a government, and their refusal to join with them has been a massive issue and might likely be a massive issue in the upcoming election. With all that being said, at the time, Naftali Bennett was the settler.
Right.
He was the guy. He was like the head of the settler movement. This was, he was the radical right. He was the guy that was making being right-wing cool, really cool in Israel. I am not betting on this man to be the guy who reckons, certainly in the way he's talking now about we will prevent a Palestinian state. Only a strong right wing will do that. Only our party will prevent the Palestinians from, taking more land and from preventing us from taking land. That's not someone I'm prepared to bet on as the guy who's going to make the necessary changes to even bring Israel to the table to negotiate some sort of, peaceful solution to this conflict.
And is there an appetite for a peaceful solution to the conflict, or no? That's largely just missing in the discourse. It's all about the personality regime of Netanyahu that will do what he's doing, but will be nicer and chiller about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, even Yair Golan is not someone who, well, I think that he personally recognizes the need to end the occupation. I think that even he has said in the interviews, I think there was a New Yorker piece, it might have been New York Times, but I believe it was New Yorker, that where he said, I kind of have to work with what exists, right? Regardless of what I personally believe. There was also, I think, an important bit in that piece that talked about how there was a joke about how young the crowds at his rallies were, because they weren't. It's a whole bunch of old people who are there who are voting for the only party, having swallowed up Meretz, that is in any way Jewish and even acknowledges really, the occupation as a bad thing, maybe. And he's going to top out at 14, 15 mandates. No, there's just not. I mean, I think that you could convince me that 25% of the Israeli public, including all 48 Palestinians, Israeli Arabs, really believes in making a change and thinks it is important to do. The vast majority of Israelis are somewhere between supportive of continuing to ethnically cleanse as much land as possible and take it over, and or just apathetic, right? Just really don't care that much. And kind of just want to keep living their lives and are far more concerned about the way that Israel's perceived in the world because of Netanyahu. It's like people who wouldn't actually say, oh, it's a genocide, but they just don't like that they're worried about traveling and being arrested, right? Or traveling and being, attacked or criticized because they're Israeli when they tell people that. They want cheaper rent. They want cheaper groceries. They want to be able to live their life and find an apartment in the center where they can get to work. They're not thinking about the occupation. They're not thinking about apartheid. It is not high on their priority list.
That's so interesting because of conscription and because of the the nature of the army. People are happily still sending their children to occupy whatever needs to be occupied. Interesting because you can, okay, they're defending the status quo because, it doesn't affect them. It only affects Palestinians. But no, it's killing their children. It's killing Israeli soldiers. Like what, if any, does that factor in people's minds, or is it just, tov lamut ad aretzenu? It's good to die for your country.
I mean, that's a direct quote that you translated, so
Yeah.
we don't even have to go that far, right? But I think the deal for a very long time, really up until October 7th, was for many people, for many Israelis, it was, hey, if you're an able-bodied man, go keep us safe by enforcing the occupation and keeping the borders safe for a few years. You do 3 years of this, and then, you're treated better in society, right? The number one way, the going to Harvard of Israeli society is like being a pilot, right? Or like being an elite combat unit, right? That's the number one way for you to move forward in society and to move ahead and to be considered a future leader.
Are there nepo babies? Do people get into certain
100%,
units?
of course. Look, there's it's called Poltixia. Yeah, it's like who do you know, right? Who do you know in this unit who can help you get into this unit, right? That will then be your connections, and because you're going to tell people for the rest of life what you did. And if you were a combat soldier in an elite combat unit, people are going to look at you a certain way, right? I think that the extent to which Israeli society, and I really felt this during my gap year, and I was somewhat consumed by it, and even more so in the recent years after I've seen it, the extent to which there's very little questioning of the army, right? Like there's very little tolerance for any sort of real debate around, hey, is this a good idea? Should the army be doing this, or are these good actions, right? Like if the army goes and does something, it's kind of just assumed that was necessary, right? Like there is just tremendous trust in the army to be the most moral army in the world and to do whatever is necessary to protect Israelis. And to, is a strong group that is there to keep Jews safe, right? So you end up in this place of a culture where there's not a movement. Like I have really good friends and I've worked with people in Misalvot, in New Profile, who are, like trying to create in different ways avenues for people to not join the army, and to make it a thing. And those videos, I see them get tremendous views outside of the country. But you go and look at those Hebrew comments, and capo, traitor, evil. You don't understand that they protect you. You will never be, you'll never get it. There's just not an appetite in Israeli society, for any sort of real criticism of what the army is doing on a moral level. We're not there. We're not even close.
And then do you think there is in American society or in diaspora society, or that's my way of segging into what is from here forward?
From here forward is definitely based on the belief that very different things are occurring within Israeli society and with Jewish, at least American diaspora society, right? I think I want to separate, because I think it's important to and recognize that the American Jewish community, while I have plenty of issues with its leaders and its politics and institutions, is still almost certainly the most progressive diaspora Jewish community in the world, not to mention the largest, right?
For sure, as a Canadian Jew, like the Overton window, Canadian Jews are even further to the right, which is bonkers. So as bad as things are on the Upper West Side, like things are amazing in Brooklyn.
Right, 100%. And if you go down to Latin America or you go over to parts of Europe, completely different reality, right? But we are obviously a very large Jewish community where we are a stronghold of Democratic votes for as long as, since FDR, right? I don't think a Republican has ever touched 30% of the Jewish vote in a presidential election, right? Like when we pride ourselves on our involvement in labor rights, in civil rights, right? In the movements that have made America, brought whatever good exists in this country, Jews have often prided themselves in being large parts of those movements, right? And certainly when you look at the younger generation of Jews as compared to the younger generation of Israelis in thinking about where we're going in the future, we're progressive. We are incredibly critical of Israel. I think there's a split certainly between, we'll say anti, non, even just Zionist, but very critical. But there's many, many young Jews in America who are uninterested in having the same relationship with Israel that their parents and grandparents had, right? It's not happening. It's not reflected in any polls. You can see it in voting, right? You can see it in voting. Certainly the New York mayoral election, when you take Jews under 40, the numbers are, there's very much a split. And something I think about a lot is, had it been Brad Lander versus Andrew Cuomo, I think Brad Lander, who in many ways has a lot of the same politics as Zoran Mamdani when it comes to Israel-Palestine, I think would have won Jews in a blowout, right? I think that there's a lot of different things, a lot of different factors that made Jews feel uncomfortable with Zoran Mamdani. But, I think right now we're about to have the Lander-Goldman primary, right?
Yes. Speaking of Jews in Brooklyn, yeah, wow.
Speaking of Jews in Brooklyn, Lander's going to win in a blowout, right? Every poll has shown that since he announced, right? And all the polling comes out over and over. I think 60% of American Jews believe that Israel's committed war crimes. I think 40% think it's a genocide. I think that more and more every time it's polled believe that there is an apartheid regime in the West Bank. The process is occurring, right, of American Jews becoming both removed, critical, and depending on who they are, uninterested in Israel, right? Uninterested in making that the center of their Judaism, and interested in sending hundreds of millions of dollars there, uninterested in defending it with their political power and institutions, right? And this kind of is the from here forward thought is, when I put it all into one sentence, my goal, our goal, may it one day be currently it's mine, is we need to slow things down on the ground and we need to speed them up here, right? When we think about ethnic cleansing on the ground, it will not be stopped without governmental change. There are people who believe that governmental change will happen in Israel. I hope that they're right. I'm not betting on it. So that leaves me, as someone with citizenship in both places, but certainly with far more of a desire to live here and continue my life here and invest in the community here, in changing the way that we interact, right? In changing the way that we vote, that we raise money, where we send money, what we invest in, with the goal of doing what we can to keep people in their homes for as long as we can. Having done protective presence now for a long time, we can help. We can keep people for another week, another month, another year, depending on just the situation that they're in and how much pressure that they're under in their home, in their village, in their community. But we need to change the macro reality, the governmental reality, specifically, in my opinion, of the United States in order to see real change on the ground. I don't think that without a different president and a different Congress and a different U.S. policy in general towards the Middle East and specifically towards Israel-Palestine, Israel and the Israeli government will decide to dramatically change things. They are happy to keep going as they are, and they only move every day as older people die, as the brain drain continues and people who can leave do leave, and as more young Israelis enter the voting population, they become more right-wing, more fascistic, and more uninterested in stopping all of the things that we as American Jews, by and large, find odious and horrible, and dangerous to ourselves here.
Yeah, I keep thinking like we were so asleep at the wheel during the Obama era, man. Like I remember being like, wow, like once the boomers pass away, everyone's going to be queer or at least queer friendly. But no, we see how the idea, the Trump movement showed that like no, Gen Z is right wing. Like we can't just trust in generational changes for policy changes to happen. What policy change do you want to see happen? Does it look like actual consequences for murder is a good place to start, eh?
That would be pretty wonderful. I'm just going to push back really quickly. I think that the 2024 election will turn out to be an outlier. I think that currently polls are showing that Gen Z and younger people will go out and vote for Democrats in much higher numbers than they did. I think that was a particular moment. And I think a lot of that actually was to do with Israel and Palestine, right? I think there were a lot of young folks who either didn't vote or voted for Trump out of spite, out of anger, legitimate anger, whether or not I feel that it was misplaced or incorrect tactically, reasonable anger at a government and, a ruling, I won't say coalition because that's not how it works, but, a presidency that was uninterested in changing its policies, even as things became more and more clear what was happening on the ground, right? Now we will see. I do think Gen Z will not be as progressive as millennials are, but I do think at the end of the day, certainly if the economy crashes in the next few years and they are dealing with a horrific job market, as they kind of already are, and things are super expensive, I think many of them will recognize the error of voting for Republicans. With that being said, consequences, I mean, I think the list is long. I think you can start at a basic level with extensive, significantly stronger sanctions on settlers, right? That's easy. We've already started that. We can go way harder. We can just ramp those up dramatically. If we're continuing to focus on individuals, I would love for the United States to be leading the charge in the way that the Hin Rajab Foundation is doing in actively prosecuting soldiers who can be proven to have participated in genocide and in war crimes. And there's a lot of those because they filmed themselves doing it and posted it to the internet. So there's not, go ahead.
What are some lowlights for the people who have a different algorithm? Because I know the people I grew up with maybe have different algorithms than I do, but it's nonstop setting things on fire, gender reveals via building demolition, drag race, putting on women's clothes from homes, and they've posted it themselves, and it's not AI.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like a weird sexualization thing happening too, with a lot of with the bras and the underwear and all those pictures that they're taking. I mean, just like videos of them just blasting bullets out of nowhere, just because they can. Pictures of people like, sitting down and, pooping as they look out into the destruction of Gaza. The spray painting on destroyed water cleanliness facilities, and just, I mean, people just like taking like cool videos of themselves smoking cigarettes while in the background a hospital blows up. The list is just ongoing and endless. And, I think, so when I talk to some friends who are on dating apps in Israel, a pretty consistent thing they'll see is if they are a straight woman or a gay man swiping on men, or anyone swiping on men, you will see a lot of men with their army photos in Gaza with destruction behind them. This is something that I really try to get across to people is like, this is cool. This is something that within Israeli society, people actively think is cool, right? Like being part of this army and having participated in this and posting these videos, it is not something you will never get in those comments and see a whole bunch of people saying, hey man, this is immoral. This is gross. Like those are humans. Those are homes. Those are hospitals. You might see someone post that and then you're going to see 20 comments in response. Shut up. These are not humans. They deserve this. What about October 7th? So starting there, you can go individuals. I think when you go larger, I mean, like, let's enforce the law, right? Let's stop sending Israel weapons to commit war crimes with that we can prove they're committing war crimes with, right? Like, let's stop sending rifles and guns that we know are going to the West Bank to help ethnically cleanse Palestinian villages and cities, right? There's so many things. Do I think that we will at some point likely have to get to the point of just intense sanctions, like really serious economic, devastatingly harsh economic sanctions? Feasibly. Again, I would hope not. I have family and friends there. I don't want that to be the case. But at a certain point, I think that the daily reality of Israelis has to change in order for them to recognize that they need to change things, right? Like, they are still in many ways the power broker. They still at a certain point will have to come to the table. I think they will need to be forced there, but so many things we can do to do that are in our hands and are really kind of, in many ways, the result of just a few people making the opposite decision that they're currently making, right? Actually, that's not going there. X. I'm not voting that way. No, that's not happening. We are putting this sanction on, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. You mentioned the Lander Goldman primary, the fact that one vote for the Block the Bombs Act in Brownstone, Brooklyn can change the reality of people on the other side of the world. It's good when it works, but it's
Yeah.
like a crazy, outsized power that American
100%.
voters have.
100%. And yeah, I mean, we have tremendous ability to make changes, right? And I think that is something that I really want people to understand is we have a lot of power in this situation. Israel is not domestically manufacturing a lot of these weapons. Israel does not really have the capability to do so. Certainly not right now, and it would take years to develop. Israel is reliant in so many ways upon the United States. And one by one, primary by primary, bill by bill, we can change things. And there's so many Democratic primaries, and I think we're going to see this more and more and more. Certainly, I mean, we're seeing it right now, but I think in 2028 it's going to be a huge thing where there's going to be two Democrats who in many ways are kind of the same, right? They're going to say, I support maybe Medicare for all or something like that, or just like some sort of, expanded healthcare program. They're going to say we support raising the minimum wage, whatever other issues, are popular domestically, right? And then one of them is going to say, I think that we should fundamentally change our relationship with Israel. I think that we should stop sending them money. I think we should stop sending them weapons. I think they no longer need to be someone that we support unless, or maybe just entirely no, but maybe just unless they fundamentally change the way that they function, right? And I think there is the difference between someone who would be endorsed by maybe J Street and, if not now, or JVP, right? And then you're going to have the other Democrat who is going to say, yeah, settler violence is bad. Yeah, it's bad that kids are dying, but like Israel's our best friend and ally, and we have to make sure that they can defend themselves because they're in the scary neighborhood and Muslims are scary.
Yeah.
And we can, one by one, make sure that those people do not hold a lever of power, right? We can make sure we can create a reality day by day by influencing our community and influencing the people around us. And I think more than anything else, what has dramatically changed the U.S. voter and the average, Democratic primary voter around this too is just watching the reality on the ground, right? Which is where I think the storytelling and the documenting really has been tremendously important in, it's really hard. And I think this is a huge part of from here forward. And my experience in changing people's minds and having any impact on anyone is that it's a lot harder to argue with I saw than I think, right? You have thoughts, I have thoughts, everybody's got thoughts, and that's wonderful. But I've seen people get killed, right? I've seen one of my best friends bleed out on the floor and then go up to a settler, and I go up to a settler as this is happening, and I tell him, you just killed someone, and he tells me, and I'm glad I did it. And then I watch that same settler point out the Palestinians he wants arrested while literally 20 minutes before he had murdered someone, right? Like I've seen these things and I'm not the only one. And I've had my own specific experiences on the ground. And I am one of now hundreds, if not thousands of American Jews who has witnessed the horrors of what is happening every single day in the West Bank. And all of us through our phones have watched Gaza now for 3 years. And now many of us are watching Lebanon and Syria, Iran, and we have an ability to stop a lot of this, to change this reality. And it's going to be really hard, and it's going to involve a lot of really difficult conversations, and it's likely going to involve a lot of people fighting with their families and friends and struggling through a whole process of getting through to people that takes a long time. But the only way out is through. I genuinely believe that we can make a change. If I didn't, I wouldn't do this. I would go into finance, or I'd go back to working for a union. Probably more the second one. But I think that we can do this, right? I really do think that there is a possibility of our community building new institutions, taking power in old ones, and fundamentally changing the way that the United States acts in Israel and Palestine. And I do think that that would fundamentally change the way that the reality in the ground looks there.
I'm so sorry about Awdah. I didn't get to meet him, but I feel like I have. I spoke to Sam Stein and Zach Wides on the show. So if you could tell us a bit more about him, and
Yeah.
you witnessed the murder. Holy shit,
So
man! I'm so sorry.
no, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we became friends. Am I allowed to curse on
Oh
here?
my God! Please, I just said shit. Yeah.
Great, cool.
Yeah.
So I walked into Omaha in 2021. I was wearing an Arsenal jersey. Let's go Gunners.
Yeah.
We're gonna win the league. Come on, boys. Um, I walk in wearing an Arsenal jersey, Bukayo Saka shirt, and he kind of looks in. He's the first guy I really meet in Omaha because we're there meeting them. He's the representative of the village. Our group is there, and he looks at me. He's like, "Why the fuck are you wearing that shirt?" And I'm like, "Cause my team, dude. Because I love these guys." He's a big Ronaldo fan, which in turn made him a Man United fan at one point. So we just started talking shit, and he and a lot of the other guys in Khair were just like really taken with the fact that this American walked in who like wanted to play soccer with them and wasn't, I'm not great, but I'm good enough. Who wanted to barbecue with them, who ate meat. They were like really surprised, having received so many internationals who were like really thoughtful and brave and really wonderful people. But, like these guys wanted to bro down, and, the internationals and Israelis coming are like vegan leftist intellectuals. They weren't gonna hang out at the kebab and then watch the Real Madrid Barcelona game. And I was like, hell yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. So we really, bonded over that and bonded over my desire for them to have a real soccer field, which is something that I really, I saw how much they love the game. I heard so many stories of them playing on this field that bordered the settlement of Carmel, where the settlers would like throw glass bottles over to break so they would cut their feet, where the ball would go over the fence and they just couldn't get it back. And, we spent years kind of thinking about like, what would it look like for you to feel? How can we make this happen? What do I need to fundraise? All these things. And then this summer, we kind of came into connection with a donor who was really excited about making this happen. So we started, we were like super excited. We told people in the village, the work was starting to happen. Obviously, it was getting stopped at every turn at feasible by settlers. And we were trying to figure out how to get everything there without it becoming a problem. And one of the last things that Awdah ever said to me, and this is a few weeks after he was denied entry into the United States, when he and Eid were going to come visit for 20 days and tell everyone about their lives. They were going to tour all these synagogues. And one of the last things he said to me is, we're sitting one night, just hanging out. And I asked, hey man, like, are you excited? And he's like, look, man, I'm not excited. I'm not excited. I just want to play, right? Like, we've been thinking about this for so long. He was just like so ready for this. The last night he spends on this earth alive is celebrating another international's birthday with his 3 sons. He was a huge birthday guy, loved it, and got to watch his youngest son like fist cake into his mouth. And it just brought him just such tremendous joy. And then we're barbecuing and hanging out. And it was really wonderful. And then, the next day, the incident that occurred. I kind of witnessed my friend Ahmad, who was one of his best friends, get hit by a jackhammer in the shoulder. I was checking on Ahmad while that was occurring. I heard kind of 2 booms that at the time I thought were sound grenades. Ahmad asked me, I was translating between 2 internationals who were there, they were trained as nurses or, as paramedics. He communicated that he needed some water. I ran back to the community center to go get water, and there was a lot of screaming. And as I turn into the community center, I see Awdah on the ground bleeding out, kind of what really were, probably the last 10, 15 minutes of his life. So a lot of his last breaths. So very few people, I don't know if anyone saw him get shot, but I was one of the people who definitely saw him dying, and I attempted to, I was asked by the Palestinians of Khair to attempt to get into the ambulance with him to try and go with him so there would be someone there to communicate what his status was. And I was prevented from doing so by the Israeli army. And then he was pronounced dead upon arrival to the hospital, and we kind of had to wait for a while before we got there. Not too long, but long enough.
And
So yeah.
My God. And because this show is called War is Stupid, what possible justification could an army have for denying someone to ride in an ambulance with their friend? Is it just the cruelty, trying to punish you for being friends with Palestinians, for being on the wrong side of the fence? Like, that's just objectively insane. Like, dude's with his friend. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not,
Well, here's what I'll say.
yeah.
A bunch of those soldiers later, I was talking to them, or, they penned us all up. And this is after Yinon Levy, the settler who killed Awdah, came and pointed out which Palestinians he wanted arrested. Um, as that occurred, we were there. The soldiers kind of all had us penned up in Umm al-Khair. And they were, just like making comments to us and like, getting into like staring contests with the internationals and saying things to us. And, I'm talking to one of them, or I'm like, like someone just died here, guys. And one of the soldiers, the same soldiers, one of them said, I wish I had killed him.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and, two of other soldiers like agreed and were like, yeah, me too. So cruelty, there was a lot going on. They didn't know who I was, whatever. I think regardless, whatever justification they had, what they told me and the way that they acted towards us and the way they treated us in the wake of this man who was beloved to this community being killed, I think it tells the whole story. I don't really know what their orders were. I know what they said when they weren't under orders, right? I know what they said as individuals. I know what they told me. I know how they treated us. And I know they weren't punished for it.
That is so horrifying. And I think maybe as a way of like bringing two strands together. So it'll be hard to convince people who think that blowing things up, killing people is cool, that that's not cool. But what is cool is football, obviously. So like the whole movement to like get Israel banned from FIFA, like do you think like that can get people to realize that what they're doing is wrong if they can't participate in the World Cup or
I think that is
Eurovision?
I think that is absolutely a huge part of the work, 100%. I think that Israel and Israelis want to be seen as part of the global community. They want to be seen as part of the West. And I think that the more and more we prevent them from participating in that, the more they will feel isolated and think they want to change. A lot of these people don't care, right? A lot of these people are religious fanatics who want the West Bank and they want the land and they don't want to go to Europe. They don't give a shit. But a lot of more moderate or liberal people, and certainly moderates, like they want to go on their ski vacation. They want to go to Greece. They want to go, they want to come to America. They want to take these trips. They want to go to India and Thailand after the army and do a ton of drugs and like forget about what they did, right? They want to do these things and we don't have to let them, right? Just like, look, Russia is not participating in the World Cup or qualifiers. I have plenty of critiques of what Russia has done in Ukraine. Israel is blowing them out of the water, okay? Like, there's no comparison. And Israel's still in there. Now, I think that is, and we're seeing this, like, just recently, right? Like, just a few days ago, Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, tried to get, the Palestinian head of their football association, the head of the Israeli football association to, shake hands in front of everyone. They, I'm sure they have a lot of pressure and they don't want to be seen a certain way, but they are actively pushing. Both FIFA and UEFA are really trying to prevent Israel from being banned, despite the fact that I believe the majority of at least UEFA being which is the European Federation of Soccer, really wanting to get them banned. The majority of those teams and those national federations. Excuse me. I think that we're moving in the right direction. I think it is, I hope it's a matter of time. And, actively, Israelis are trying to include, clubs playing in settlements and in occupied territory in their leagues and stuff like that. And Palestinian fields are being destroyed and Palestinian athletes are being killed. I can talk about, the field that Awdah and I were working on that was, originally supposed to be, for his village and now is his memorial field, right? And days after being completed. And I'm completed. I'm talking about this is land that was uneven and hilly. It was flattened out with sand and some gravel was put over that. And then we rolled out a bunch of turf. This is not the Burnabout. This is not Camp Nou. There's no seating. There's not even bleachers. The goals aren't even permanent. And a week later, there was a stop work order on this, right? that Regavim created, like pushed for and created, right? And likely will be a demolition order in a bit. Anything that brings Palestinians joy is under attack, right? All of it. Anything that allows them to feel like I can stay here, I can keep living here, I can keep pushing through this, is under attack by Israelis, right? And football is, like the cliche of the global language, and something that brings everyone together. And I'm of the belief that if you want to participate in that, you shouldn't be committing a genocide. You shouldn't be an apartheid regime. You shouldn't be ethnically cleansing your neighbors who, guess what, like it just as much as you do and deserve just as much of an opportunity to play and to be good and to play on green grass that's flat. And allows them to try the things that we all watch every single day on our screens and go out and want to replicate. And I'm really hopeful that, this World Cup, we will see throughout stands, we will see Palestinian flags, and they will likely be banned in certain places and they will be confiscated. But we will see, certainly in Algeria and Jordan and so many games, the Palestinian flag being there because despite Israel's desire to erase this in all its forms, we refuse, right? We simply refuse. And I'm not a big believer in our joy is resistance. That's not my thing. That's not my it's not my MO. I believe in equal opportunity, right? I believe in everybody's chance to play this game that brings us so much joy and to dream of one day doing it at the highest stage possible. And I think that when you are actively preventing other people from doing that, you don't need to be part of it.
Amen. And so as we wind down, how can we help? Where can people find you? How can people plug into From Here Forward? And we might not have time, but where are you traveling to this summer? Because that is, I'm excited to follow along.
Yeah. So I think from here forward right now, there's a lot of building out and there's going to be a lot of figuring out what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. I'm on Instagram. That's my home. There will be more. I'm probably doing my best to avoid X as I find it to be as my favorite place that I now hate. I used to really love it. I'll be on Facebook. I'm on Threads, wherever, but ideally Instagram. Obviously, if you feel like donating, that's wonderful. Building out an email list, all of this is occurring, right? If you've spent time on the ground, I want to talk to you, right? If you've spent time on the ground, I want to think about how we maximize your voice, right? It's really great when people go and have these experiences, but if you go home and you tell a whole bunch of people who already know what's going on and already agree with you what you saw, we are not pushing anything. We are not changing, we are not pushing power. We are not organizing. We are simply telling ourselves what we know to be true, right? We need to be forcing change. We need to be encouraging it. We need to be thinking about our relationships with people who have power and how we can impact them. I have seen people that I know who disagreed with me, but know who I am and have known me outside this context, change and shift because they recognize that someone that they know and they care about is living this experience and can talk to them about it. As a peer, as a friend, as someone that they have seen play basketball or, write a story or just hang out with them, right? And so many of us have these connections. So many of us grew up in these movements and these institutions and might know people that maybe we've tuned out and maybe we don't want to talk to because we're sick of what they have to say, but we have to. We have to do this. That is the work. The work is, yes, it is building new institutions 100%, but until those new institutions have power, we do need to actively be working at trying to change the people who control the ones that currently have power. So if you have these experiences and you want to talk about them, and I want you to, let's do it. Reach out. Let's find a time to chat. If you are planning on going, go do that. Have that experience. And when you come back, talk to me. Let's find a time. Let's meet up and let's think about the most useful way for your voice to go and impact as many people as possible and create this effect where it's not just me telling my story. It's you telling your story to someone who is then telling it to more people, who is changing the way that they vote or act or send money, and creates this, I'm blanking on the word I'm really looking for, but this causal effect that really continues to push this catalytic or this catalyst effect, right, of really changing how we how our community interacts. So there will be more. A lot of it is being figured out. With that being said, in a few days, in like less than 2 weeks now, it's crazy, or like 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks now, I am getting in the car and I'm driving across the country to watch the World Cup. So I've been thinking about this for years. I'm a huge fan, obviously, as if you've been watching this long, you can tell.
Yeah.
And when the raffles finally opened, I got everyone in my life to enter. And my roommate was the only one that hit early enough. And I had made a list as soon as the games had dropped. Like, how do I get from this game to this game on time? How do I make this happen? In order to make a road trip where I would go and see a game at every stadium in the U.S. that's hosting one. Right? So my roommate hit. I got in there immediately and looked at the ticket prices and said, fuck it, we only live once,
If
send
not
it,
now,
and
when? It's what
if
Hillel
not
would have
now, when I'm
wanted.
in. I'm
Yeah.
in, I'm in. And bought a whole bunch of tickets, and yeah, I'm gonna be in LA for the US opener. I go from there to San Francisco, Seattle, Kansas City, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Miami, New York, Philly, Boston. And I'm going to be driving across the country, on my way out there, going through Chicago and Detroit and Pittsburgh on my way back, stopping through a lot of places. And I'm looking to meet with people, Palestinians, Israelis, Jews, anyone who's interested in thinking about what their role is in this. And from here forward is meant to serve as connective tissue. There's so many orgs doing this. You know, when I first started thinking about this, it was a lot of what isn't already being done, right? What isn't already happening? Because so much is happening and there's so many people doing great work. How do we maximize it, right? How do we maximize it and take a second and think long term about what really creates change, what isn't just reactive, but is also proactive in facilitating the reality that we want to see in a few years.
That's amazing. And damn, you convinced me. I used to feel lucky that my 10-year high school reunion happened over COVID. But no, I'm like, next 20 years, unless everything is fixed by then, I'm going to have to roll up to the Community Hebrew Academy of Toronto. And
Squirrel Hill? Oh no, sorry, Pittsburgh. What is my Thorn? What's
Thornhill is
Thornhill? There
yes.
we go. Well, I was right with the hill. Okay.
Exactly, yes.
That is the
Yes,
work. Yeah, I mean, it sucks,
exactly.
right? I think so many of us think about returning to these institutions and to, talking with people who we've watched post things that we can't stand on Facebook or Twitter or, their email listserv. But that's the work,
Yeah, I
right? The
gotta
work is uncomfortable. The work is unpleasant. The work is engaging with the ideas that we disagree with. And slowly but surely forcing people to engage with the reality that exists.
and it can be done. You've seen minds change.
I've seen people change their mind. I've seen people think about this in a real way, and really be forced to consider what they are enabling, what they are supporting, and what they can do to create a better reality for everyone, for Jews and Palestinians and an entire world where we are watching many of the things that we care about and that I certainly appreciate about this world collapse because of what we enabled and allowed to happen in Gaza. And on a selfish pitch, and I really want to talk about so many other things before I want to talk about this, but I like being a Jew. I like being an American Jew. I like living here and wearing a Magen David and being loud and proud about what the institutions that raised me and the religion and the culture. And for that to continue to be the case, people cannot see this and think apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing. They need to see people who are loudly and proudly Jewish fighting against these things for our safety, for our moral standing, for the good of humanity and for the good of the future of the Jewish people who I intend to raise. I would like to have Jewish children, and I know right now that they will grow up in a different reality than I did, and it is my goal for them to at least grow up in a reality where there are Jews who the world and their communities around them recognize as people who are humans first, who believe in collective justice, in freedom, in equality, in dignity, and prioritize those things for everyone. And do the work. Go out and do the work with their bodies, with their voices, when it's uncomfortable, when it's hard, when it's inconvenient, when there are consequences for it within their community, and they don't care because they recognize what needs to happen in order for the world to be a better place and for us and for everyone around us to be safe.
Oh, thank you. This is galvanizing. I feel fired up, ready to go. you should run for office eventually, not in my district because I'm in the Bradlander Dan Goldman district, but one day you have the moral clarity and the public speaking skills, but
that's
no
very
pressure.
kind of you. That's very kind of you. For now, I am. I wanted to figure out what my role is in this larger movement, and I think I don't want. I want my politicians in the United States to be primarily thinking about the United States. And right now, that's not where I'm at. I would like to get there. And the goal is to get there, right? The goal is to bring us to a point where we are thinking, where I am able to be here and think primarily about what is happening to the people around me, and not exclusively, because obviously the world matters too, but I live here. These are my people. This is my community. And I want to get to a point where we are actively thinking more about what we are doing here than all the terrible things that we are enabling or doing ourselves everywhere else. And I think we can. That's my hope. My hope is that we can get there. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but people aren't going to say I didn't try.
Exactly. You're doing incredible work, and I'm excited to see both the trip and the nonprofit, how it evolves. Who are we rooting for in the World Cup? The United States? Not to
people
do
like people are just not going to like my answer.
a dual loyalty trope.
I'm a certified Argentina, Spain, France, Germany hater.
Ooh,
and those
fun.
are probably, I don't want to see any of them. I'm uninterested. Keep them away. I mean, I'll watch them play because a lot of them play very nicely, but I don't want to see them win. My hopes are for a deep USA run. England or Brazil in the final. I do like the English team. A lot of their best players play for my favorite team. I would love to see Colombia go far. I would love to see Ecuador go far. Who else do I believe in? Morocco making a deep run would be awesome again. I'm a big Netherlands fan. The orange got me. I was very sad when they lost in the 2010 final. I have many rooting interests. There are many players I appreciate. If it's a Spain-Argentina final, I am just going to be really pissed off.
Yeah.
But hell yeah, go USA. This is the time. This is the time to prove to the world that we're serious. Maybe not in hosting a World Cup, but maybe in playing. So prayers up. I'm not being sponsored by anyone, so if this shit is a shit show, they will know on Matt Burkett on Instagram.
Yes.
For sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Orli, thank you for having me. War is fucking stupid, everybody.
Hell yeah. Thank you for listening and or watching War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. Please subscribe, rate and review, tell your dads. We'll see you next time.